Welcome back, everybody, to the Escape Collective Classic Specials. We're sitting here. It's Thursday ahead of Paris-Roubaix, both Paris-Roubaix. I'm sitting with Dane Cash.
Hi, Kaylee. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm a little distracted by your mustache.
Oh, well, I do it for the members. I do everything for the members. And a member, I don't know, that's a little too long to get into the explanation, but there were reasons for it.
There's a member here with a spectacular
It's really
stash.
great. I can't even compete.
Was he the one that sort of
It was him.
shamed you into it, basically?
Well, he just requested that we have some way to identify ourselves while we were here riding in Belgium, and we rode. Well, we've been riding all week. We did the Koppenberg today. We did a couple other climbs, and yeah, this is the first time I've ever had a mustache in my entire life. I mean, I've had a beard, but this is the first time I've shaved everything else and just left the mustache.
There's some Belgian youths watching us make this podcast very confused as to why we're talking about this at the moment.
I think so, yeah.
Also joining me today, Matt Deneve.
Hello, hello. I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You don't have a mustache. You could, actually.
I could. I've tried it before. It's no good for anybody involved.
One, Matt does have some facial hair. And two, Matt can do whatever he wants. Today, he rode also up the Koppenberg, the Paderberg.
That was my big goal for today, and I ticked that off the list.
It was a great ride.
Yeah,
it was really. We were out riding with our members. We're having our member summit this week, and they split into two groups. We had a 60K group and a 90K group. And the 60K group, Matt and I, you and I were with them, and we did. We did a whole big loop around Oudenaarde first, and then Quaremont, Paderberg, Koppenberg, and it was spectacular. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Paris-Roubaix, which is this weekend, and I should say that there's actually a fourth here. Johnny Long is here, however, he's inside getting us beer, so
he's doing the most important job.
No
of all
intro
right
for Johnny today. He's just going to show up, and then Dane, you're just going to disappear because you have to go. Not have to. You get. I
want to.
Yeah, you get to go.
I put my hand up for this.
This is like Dane's most favorite thing the entire week. You're going to go do a sort of a history tour here in Kortrijk.
Yeah, a little walking tour of Kortrijk. I mean,
with the escapees.
9 o'clock at night here in Kortrijk, so it's just going to be a nighttime tour. We're not going to go into any of the churches or towers or anything, but we're going to walk around them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to provide some context. It's going to be good. I get to talk about feudalism to people who are going to, I mean, they're showing up to listen to it. So I think it's going to be great.
I believe they're queuing up already.
Let's get into Paris-Roubaix.
Let's do it.
We're not even going to set the scene. Maybe we'll set the scene at the end and then the After Dark section. Roubaix this weekend. We've got the women's race on Saturday. We're going to talk about that in the second half of the show. We actually have a great little grab from a rider talking about this weekend that Abby got this week. We'll have that later. But let's kick off with the men's race because, Dane, you're going to have to jet, and this is your area of expertise. Any changes of note?
No, nothing.
To the course,
there has been no news.
The course or route of Paris-Roubaix this year.
Basically, anybody who listens to this podcast is almost certainly aware that Roubaix has 29 cobble sectors. They include 5-sector cobbles like the Arenberg and the Carrefour and Mont-Saint-Pavel, and they're very hard. The big changes this year are that there are some chicanes added just before the peloton reaches the Arenberg, which happens pretty early relative to the other cobbled
100K out-ish?
Yeah, it's like sort of the first big cobbled sector. It really heralds the start of the really hard cobbles.
We always say that, but like I've followed the race before in a team car, and there are a heck of a lot of riders who never make it to
That's
Arenberg.
true, yes.
From TV, it looks like, oh yeah, they just sort of ride along until they hit the Arenberg, but no, it's already kind of exploded. But this year, I think it's going to explode even further. Well, explain exactly what this looks like.
Yeah, there's incentive now. I mean, as if there weren't already incentive. You wanted to reach the Arenberg in a good position because not only is this a 5-star cobbled sector, which makes it very hard, it's a narrow stretch through the woods. It's a stifling environment. You wanted to get there in good position already. And that was before they decided, at the behest of the CPA, the Riders Association, to sort of force a slowdown. That's actually what they're hoping to do. Whether that's actually going to happen or not, we'll see. I mean, because there's going to be now a race, thank you, Johnny Long, to get through the chicanes and into good position. So now you're just going to be racing to get to the chicanes. So we're going to see probably lead-outs to get to the chicanes.
So I wrote a story about this today, and I am convinced that not only is... So there's a couple things happening here, right? Like the riders and the CPA specifically asked for something that would decrease the speeds into the Arenberg, because like I was looking at Strava earlier today, and for example, Filippo Ganna has the Strava KOM across the Arenberg right now. He entered the Arenberg that day, the race day, at 64 kilometers per hour, and the first 10 feet are chaos. Even the first layer of cobbles is like an inch different from the pavement, and so you see like people literally break wheels on the first rock of the Arenberg regularly. So I understand that the riders would want to slow that down. There's been a number of really terrible crashes there. Mitch Docker, for example, friend of the pod, his crash there was awful. No real surprise that the riders wanted to change it. I think the issue here was that it happened in the week ahead of the race. And the most obvious sort of way around, the most obvious way into the Arenberg that is not the straight shot into the Arenberg is this sort of loop around to the left-hand side, rider's left, that has been totally passable in the past, but is apparently has two big boulders and a ditch in it right now. And that would have sort of made them make a pretty sharp left-hand turn onto the Arenberg, but wouldn't have involved what is put in place, which is a right, a 180-degree like U-turn, and then a right-hand turn onto the cobblestones.
You mentioned there that it's only in the last week this has happened. Do we know why that's the case? It's not like the Arenberg is a surprise that it's going to be part of Paris-Roubaix.
Can I quote Ronan?
Here's Johnny. He's back.
Hi, sorry, I was queuing. Very
we
British
told
of me.
everyone
Whatever.
what you were doing. Your
We'll talk about
mission.
that. We'll talk about that later. The time and place. To quote our colleague Ronan, his answer to your question, Matt: cycling.
Sums it up.
That's how it works, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, basically, what probably happened was, a week out or so, the riders start to sort of talk about this, and the CPA starts to hear about this, and Adam Hansen, the president of the CPA, goes, let's bring this to the ASO. And maybe that happened, and the ASO goes, actually, you guys are right. Like, this is a big deal, and also it's something we can maybe fix, and so let's work through it.
Well, it's the time of the week when everyone's around and focused on this race to actually make the change. Like, beforehand, the people aren't there to do it. The riders, they go around with blinkers. They're only thinking about the next race. They don't, because of crashes, they don't know what race they're really going to be at, is the reality that we seem to be in this year.
Right.
Today we popped along to the Soudal Quickstep press conference. We asked Casper Asgreen, like literally the first question was about it. The press officer before he introduced the team was like, "We imagine you're going to talk about the chicanes." And we think they're probably media trained or told what to talk about, even though Casper Asgreen said he's not media trained. And they seemed happy with it, I guess.
Well, I mean,
it's easy to be like, if you're not Mathieu van der Poel, you probably want.
So let's talk briefly kind of how we ended up here, right? So basically what happened was the CPA, the Riders Union-ish, we went to the riders and said, would you prefer one of these three new options or the original? And the riders, by vast majority, said one of these three new options, basically saying, like, we want something different. We can't really decide on what exactly we want different, but we want something different. And then ASO took those three options and said, well, some of these don't work at all. There's like a boulder, or there's, whatever other reason they can't get the council to give the permit to go on the road. Like, there's lots of other complications here. But they said this one, I think it's the green line on that little map they made.
I think so, yeah.
This one works. And so if you guys have chosen not to do the original and instead to have something different that slows you down, this is the option. And that's how we ended up with the right hand and the 180 and the right hand onto Arenberg.
Have you mentioned Ronan's piece on the...
We talked a little bit. Wow, I've been essentially taking credit for everything that was in there in the last 5 minutes.
Well, it's worth going to the website and reading that, because there's lots of really good explanation of how we arrived at it, and like the process and diagrams more than anything. If you're listening to this before Sunday, which hopefully you are, because it's the preview, that explains exactly how it's happened. So
here's the follow-up question, and this is a story that I wrote on this subject today. What does this do to the men's Roubaix? Like, what does it do tactically? What does it do? Does it change the winner? What does it do?
So I know that you, as the person hosting the show, you like to tee us up to talk. But Kaylee, you wrote the story, so let's tee you up. Kaylee, what does it do for them? Since you wrote the story, what does it do to the race?
Well, Dan, I'm glad you asked. We didn't even plan that, but that was good, Dan.
Thank you.
I actually appreciate that as a podcast.
And I have the fuddle together an answer that doesn't make sense. Then you're like, no, well, actually, what I was going to say.
I don't like to monologue, so I do appreciate that. And I do anyway. So what it will do is make Paris-Roubaix even harder. It'll make the Arenberg harder. So anybody who's watched a cyclocross race or a mountain bike race or something with a like really sharp turn somewhere near the start where the group is still big and not strung out, and basically what we're going to see coming into the Arenberg, knows exactly what is going to happen in that corner. Basically, the first 15, 20 riders are going to cruise through no problem. First 5 riders are going to cruise through no problem. The next 10 to 15 are going to slow down a little bit and then accelerate and probably be fine. Basically, everybody from about 20, 25 back is going to come to nearly a stop. And my guess is basically the entire latter half of the peloton literally stops 30 meters out from the start of the Arenberg.
If this happens, how chuffed will you feel? Even
Very.
though it ruins the race, you would have been right.
No, but like even if they're sort of crawling like walking pace, I would call that basically stopped, right?
Yeah.
Compare that to 64k an
There's
hour into
classic
the Arenberg.
bottleneck things
Yeah,
that you
it'll be just a
see,
massive
yeah.
bottleneck, and then it'll be what's called whiplash, right? Which is anybody who's raced ever will understand the concept of like it's smoother to be at the front. If you're at the back, you get the accordion effect, right? And they're going to accelerate, and the guys at the back are going to be just sort of standing there. So instead of having, the front of the race and the back of the race hitting the Arenberg within, say, 30 seconds of each other, the front of the race and the back of the race are going to be lucky to hit the Arenberg within a minute of each other, right? Maybe more than that. And then you're going to hit the Arenberg at 30k an hour instead of 65k an hour, which means it's going to be a 4-minute segment instead of a 3:15 segment. So the Arenberg itself will be harder. What I'm saying is there is absolutely the possibility that it breaks up the race significantly more than it has previously. Now, we've often seen it's a long way to go. It's 90k to go. We've often seen some of the big riders kind of get to the other side of the Arenberg, look around, and say, where is everybody? I'm going to wait for my teammates. I'm going to slow it down. That could very much happen, but I'm saying that it is also possible, and given the state of cycling these days, probably more likely that they just pin it, and it's basically like gapped from that moment onward and never really if you're more than about halfway back, you never really come back.
You hinted at just now the state of cycling these days, and I think that's a big part of it. Riders are far more willing to the big names are far more willing to put in the big attack. And I'm not necessarily saying that Matthew Van Der Poel. Apparently, you do. That's what they do now. Yeah,
You gotta.
And I think I'm not saying Matthew Van Der Poel is going to go solo from the Arenberg, but I think he might put in a surge, and some other big names will put in a surge, and suddenly the big group will cut down.
We wrote a climb today that I think is actually a good, not great, but like imperfect analogy to what we're going to see. Do you guys remember what climb it was? It was the first one we did.
The Molenberg.
The Molenberg.
Yes.
So in Flanders, the Molenberg, which is sort of it's unheralded. It's not even no one really talks about the Molenberg very much, but it's a really sharp left-hand corner, and then it's a really sharp uphill.
Yeah, we came to basically a stop.
We came to basically a stop, and we weren't even in a peloton, right?
Yeah.
And what happens in the race quite often is it is kind of like the start of festivities. It splits the field, and then the field comes back together. It comes into different pieces, but like that, those splits still affect the way the entire rest of the race plays out. And so I think that's probably what will happen in the Arenberg is it'll split like crazy. Anybody way back is done. Toast, right? Anybody in sort of the front half, you still might come back, but you're going to have to work for it. You're going to end up gassed by the time you get there.
Right.
It's going to be way harder.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how the big names choose to play it. It is still a long way to go. The bigger question that I come back to is, does this make the race safer? Does this make the Arenberg safer at that point? And you wrote in your piece, Kaylee, that we don't know until we get there. We won't know until Sunday night. But what do you guys think? Do you think the change will make it safer like they hope it will?
Probably, I think.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, so there's a couple sketchy things. Like I was sitting in a coffee shop this morning, and the Israel Premier Tech guys came in, and it was Hugo Hofstetter and a couple other fellas, and we asked them about it, and they're like, well, like the kind of scariest part is the fact that we're going to be slamming on the brakes over railroad tracks because there's a railroad track right there.
Yeah, there is.
Like right as they turn right? And so that has the potential to create a massive pileup. I think it's pretty likely that there's a pileup in either that first right-hand corner or in the chicane. But I also think that crashing on tarmac is preferable to crashing on cobblestones, and that's basically the calculation that the riders made.
I'm looking forward to how many "there's no respect these days" quotes we're going to get from older riders in the aftermath. But then also someone online suggested that instead of the chicane, those railroad tracks you talk about, the level crossing, is that what you guys call it?
We call it a railroad crossing.
We call it railroad crossing.
Okay. They were just putting them down and then getting everyone to stop and then lifting it up.
Yeah.
And then they carry on that way.
That'd be
Sprint
kind
for
of
the
fun,
whole
actually.
shot.
Exactly. But
That would be kind of fun.
My question is, how much regret and anxiety will a guy who's far enough back have when he's coming to a stop and then he sees on the other side of the little turn riders shooting off onto the Arenberg, so they're already there because you usually can't see it.
It's narrow enough that there are going to be riders coming into the back of that chicane to a basically stopped group,
Yeah.
and there are going to be riders halfway down the Arenberg.
Yeah. Well, and guys chasing, so you have people full power, and you just can't move.
It's going to be a spectacle.
And
right?
I think it'll help if you have a good team. It'll be another area of the race where having a team will be important.
Will Van der
They can
Poel
lead
have
you
to
out.
position? He'll actually have to position
it
himself
makes the
for the
positioning
first time, maybe ever. He'll have to figure out that stuff. What it reminds me of weirdly, and I don't know if this is completely wrong. You can tell me if it is. I don't mind. It reminds me of the Furies and the Furore. How do you say that word? Not Fura. Fura is a different word. They're chaos about when they did the F1 style start for that Tour de France stage. Do you remember that? And how much build up there was to that?
Yeah.
And then nothing happened.
And nothing happened. And it kind of feels like that, doesn't it? Where it's like this weird little thing that then
From a safety perspective, I think that's pretty likely. I think that they are very good bike riders, and they turn right on pavement often. I'm not that worried about their ability to do that.
they only enter the
our-
Arenberg
yeah,
forest
no.
once a year, unless it's in the Tour, which usually it is.
They might
if
they,
ever,
they
never.
might go flying into the fences, but I honestly
And to be clear, that's the hoped for outcome. Ideally, nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe you touched on this while I was inside queuing at the bar, but there is the fact that we had that huge crash at Basque Country today gives political weight to the reason for it, whereas if that hadn't happened, maybe the debate would be different. I mean, I don't want to get into a debate
we didn't touch on that at all because we're trying to
Okay.
get Dane out of here, but we should come back to that maybe near the end of the show. Dane, I know you have to get out. You have 3 minutes left of this podcast,
Yes.
so we do want to just do a quick, contenders,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Let's do a
Okay,
big
nice.
picture contenders of the men's race before you get out of here.
The really interesting thing about the contenders for this race is how Alpecin de Koenig has relatively quickly made me feel really dumb for saying that they didn't have a strong enough team. Because not only is Mathieu van der Poel the favorite for this race after his dominant showing in Flanders, Jasper Philipsen right up there with him. And that's maybe not a surprise because he did so well at last year's Roubaix.
Yeah.
But this team, Vermeersch last week for Van der Poel also played a very key role, has really quickly shown us. We had a conversation last week about is Little Trek the team of the classics.
Yeah, they seem
And
to be.
all of a sudden, Alpecin de Koenig is coming in hot with a Milan-San Remo and a Tour of Flanders win.
Yep.
And now they've got literally the two top favorites for Roubaix are on that team. So that'll be a big thing for Van der Poel to be able to have Philipsen in the back. Should he go on an insanely far solo move? As if there weren't enough intimidation factor already.
Yeah.
Now there's the fact that maybe Philipsen's in that second group, even less recent to chase.
That's so true. I hadn't even thought about that. Everyone's
yeah.
just so focused on Van der Poel.
And Philipsen has been up there at Roubaix in the past, so he's very likely to be up there again. And I think this race quite suits him. So
Clearly,
they have the team. I think they've got the ability to really, I don't know, once again make me feel dumb for saying that they didn't have a strong team. The flip side of that though is that I think Roubaix is significantly harder to perform consistently in just because of the randomness, the crashes, punctures, anything can happen in Roubaix, maybe more so than any other race in the year. So we should talk about the fact that there are other riders here. Mats Peterson.
Well, I was going to read off the list. You got a betting
This
app
is
up
the
on
betting
your
odds.
phone.
Yeah, I pulled up the betting
You got
odds here.
And the bookies are never wrong. That's why they
make money,
have
so they gotta be-
millions and
yeah,
millions
yeah.
of pounds and euros. Okay, so after Van der Poel and Philipsen, we have Mads Pedersen, John Degenkolb,
Well,
Filippo
I love
Ganna.
John Degenkolb being up here, by the
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
I'm sure he's actually really pleased to see that. I imagine some of them don't really care, but he'll be like, yeah,
I would
maybe,
think so.
maybe some
I
belief.
think Ghana is the sneaky. He's not sneaky. He's a superstar.
You
But
think?
I think
though? I think he's
yeah.
always the one that's gets overblown in these sorts of.
for me, this race, because of the chance of crashes, I'm thinking who is most likely to go solo if not Van der Poel? I'm thinking it's Philip.
That would actually be like, I'm not usually a fan of like 50-kilometer breakaway efforts, but that
If
would
it's
be
not Van der Poel, it'd be
imagine
more
it's like
interesting.
the hour record guy versus
Yeah.
the
The
peloton.
Peloton, yeah. And he certainly seems like he could do it.
It's
as well
like
as
that's
anyone
like a
else.
Saudi one cycling fever dream that they only
yeah.
wish could happen in real life.
We'll have to call Richie Plugge.
Nils Pollitt, Alberto Bettiol, Dylan Van Baarle, Christophe
the big
Laporte.
news, and so you're just about to read off his name, was Christophe Laporte.
Oh,
who
he's
is
out.
No, is racing.
Oh, he is racing.
As of not long ago,
Interesting.
he'll be racing. So Visma has come out and said he'll be racing. So they have both Dylan Van Baarle and Christophe Laporte. So they have
They just need people to race. They got so many injuries.
yeah,
They
walking
need
wounded.
people to
I've heard
race.
them described as, and I think
Yep.
they're really, for once, going to fly kind of under the radar.
One name you didn't mention there, who should be up higher on the bookies odds, is Stefan Kung.
Yes.
Third last year, fifth the year before.
I thought
11th
Kung
as
was
well.
actually like if I was a betting man,
Yeah.
that's
Kung.
where I would. That's where my
But
money would go.
that's a
because,
heart says Kung, head to someone
Well,
No,
else.
but he was third last
In
year.
terms of betting, though, I think
Yeah.
it's actually not.
You
We're
think
not
he's
giving
a-
betting
He's
advice.
too far down the list.
We're not
basically.
giving betting
Where's
advice.
the,
Please
where's the
don't take our betting
DraftKings
advice.
bag? Where? Come on.
But he does
I'm
have
not giving
long
betting advice. I'm
odds.
just saying if I
So-
was a betting man, that's what I.
I think no. I think that's smart. He's got longer odds, and I think he like Ghana has that solo ability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're a Kung guy, Matt, then, for the
Yeah,
for the
I mean,
weekend.
he's more of a heart pick than a head pick,
Yeah.
honestly. But yeah, as Kelly said, third is nothing to sneeze at, and it feels like he's kind of due something big like this.
So
you know?
like Alberto Bettiol says he's the last romantic cyclist, you're the last romantic cycling fan.
Sure.
He is very handsome.
He is, and he's got a great fan club, but with
Great
a
fan
weird
club.
effigy sort of thing they carry around, which I think in other parts of Europe is often carried around in religious festivals and just looks creepy. But with Stefan
Can
Kung,
you tell us more about this?
the Kung
Dane, I
fan
think you have
club.
to go.
Yeah.
Don't you have to
I'll
go?
tell you another time. After you do your walking tour,
You're
I'll give
really-
you the tour
I
of
mean,
the
I'm
Stefan
not,
Kung
I'm
fan
not
club.
kicking you out.
I know.
but,
I
you
know. All right. Bye, guys.
You have things
Goodbye.
to do. Yeah.
I'm gonna go hang out with the members.
Thank you for talking through.
I'm
the
sad I
chicane
can't come
and
to the walking tour. Maybe next trip we do.
We're gonna pass not too far from here, so once you're done the pod, you can
We'll jump on.
go to the nearest church, and we might be there.
Unfortunately, Dane has had to leave us. Any other names stand out to you guys under the radar? I mean, it's hard to be under the radar and like truly under the radar.
Power wins Roubaix. That was the message from Casper Asgreen. Like, you just got to be a guy with power. The other obviously,
Max
right?
Walscheid.
We saw him
sixth last year.
Walscheid?
Is he
Yeah.
Eighth
riding?
last year, Max Welshide.
Yeah. Walscheid.
The other,
He's German.
the other
Walscheid,
interesting
yeah.
thing, because at the Sit-Out Quick-Step press conference, there's all the usual like needling of topics. It's like everyone's asking like, oh, well, Quick-Step, are they a classics team still? Are they a Grand Tour team? Like, it's kind of overplayed and overwrought at this point. But our colleague, I think it was Chris Marshall-Bell, who's here for Rouleur, asked Casper Asgreen to rank where Quick-Step were compared to the other classics teams, and Casper Asgreen, just like without thinking, just like, well, who are the other big ones then? Who name them?
Yeah.
He asked him to name the songs of the band T-shirt that Chris Marshall-Bell was wearing. So
You
Chris
don't
was
know
like,
Nirvana.
Little Trek. I'm
Jumbo.
trying to think. Alpes and de Koenig.
Sorry, Visma.
Said Visma, and then he's
Yep.
like, and then the fourth one he gave was Quick-Step. He said those three. He's like, oh well, what about Movistar? What about UAE? And it's true is that in this era where everyone is kind of doing everything because I think everyone's
Yeah.
so scared of losing sponsorship
I
dollars.
think UAE actually is. Like if they had was it 3 or 4
they've got
riders
Nils
in that?
Pollitt, they've got
in that second group?
the Morgado guy who came from nowhere that Ian wrote about the other day. Like, the thing is, you want rouleurs for your Grand Tour hopefuls to guide them through those Grand Tours. But the thing is, part of the deal to
and
get
this
them
is their
on
moment.
board is that you say, you come to our squad, you work like a dog during
Yep.
the Grand Tours, you get like 1 or 2 protected positions at the Grand Tours, which you won't get at Quick-Step or
Yep.
Visma maybe.
Yep. And
Um,
you still get free reign at Roubaix to go do whatever you want to do.
Free reign
because-
Roubaix, you get all the equipment and
Yep.
whatever other marginal gains they're all employing. It's like a Matej Jorgensen thing, right? Like, I don't know if he's going to a Grand Tour, but whatever,
definitely will. Yeah.
whatever deal is done where he'll work for whoever's their Grand Tour leader. He's had the freedom and the victories already. That means he will do that in the summer.
How does Jorgensen go on Sunday, do you think?
Good question, that.
I was gonna say I don't
Where's
think
he
he's
finished
big
before?
enough, but I don't think he's big enough. Like
Yeah?
it would surprise me. It's smaller riders have done well at Roubaix. It is possible, right? But there is no question that being enormous and having a ton of watts, exactly what Asgreen said. Like it just
Josh
helps.
Tarling?
Yeah, and
Sorry.
Jorgensen is not small. He's like 6'3" or something, but he's pretty sort of relatively slight compared to a lot of these guys. I mean, he won Paris-Nice, right? Like Max Walscheid,
There's no Max Walscheid,
is
yeah.
not winning Paris-Nice, but probably has a threshold 100 watts higher, right, or
Yeah.
more than that even. So I think that he will. Not that he'll struggle, but I don't think that it's quite the race for him. It's a very specific event.
He's also got a couple of big contenders on his team. I mentioned Laporte before. Dylan Van Baarle, we haven't talked about. Guy won the race a few years ago.
That would be a boring victory, though, wouldn't it? I kind of don't want to even entertain the prospect
Yeah, I'm
of a
sorry.
Dylan Van Baarle win.
He's
Laporte
super
would be
nice.
good.
He's super nice.
I like
but-
Dylan.
Well, you like him because at Tour of Flanders, he was the guy who wore the varsity jacket and backwards baseball cap, the best out of all of his Melissa.
He looked by far the best in that particular getup. Yes. Yeah.
Josh Tarling,
Josh Tarling is
he's a big dude.
He's been signed by Arkea Formula 1 this year.
We're not allowed to
And-
talk about the draft too much. Otherwise, I would have. No, actually, it's too soon to even say anything to Dane about the state.
No,
of his
he's on
team.
my draft team. And I speaking of enormous, like he's enormous. I mean, Johnny, you were interviewing him ahead of
He
Flanders.
dwarfed me. You were all
You
taking
were
photos of me and laughing at how much like I was staring up at him.
No, because it wasn't that you were standing up. You were on a
I was on a curb.
curb, and he
And
was on the
still-
road, and he was still taller than you.
He's a big dude. And the thing is, if you want to do American sports analogies, you know how all the NFL prospects, they're always going wingspan, height, all those different attributes, which we thankfully don't really have in European sports because it's more romantic, it's less clinical.
In cycling, what would that be? Like tiny.
Yes, exactly.
Hips.
Well, it's kind
Hips
of
like an
watts per
11-year-old.
kilo, right? Like that's the European cycling version of that. But Josh Tarling has all the attributes of a potential Roubaix winner. You always liken him to Taylor Phinney.
Yeah.
But he also, what he said at Tour of Flanders, even though he's a big dude, was like, well, I want to finish in the front group. And this
Yeah.
dude is like 20.
He does hate drafting, which he needs to.
I asked him about that,
Figure
and
out.
his teammates actually spoke to him about that after the race. And I was like, so he has also another American phrase. He has that dog in him.
He does have that dog in him.
I think.
I mean,
he
anybody
does.
who sits 50 meters behind a group of 4 for like 15K has that dog in him.
And the dog he has in him is one of those really big ones. I'm really bad with dog breed names, but it's the one that have like dribble, just like
Like a
coming out of them.
Doberman or something.
Big
Yeah.
Doberman. Could be a Rottweiler, like Hugo Hofstetter, who has a brand new Rottweiler,
he?
7-month-old.
See, that's a
puppy.
weird thing where dogs don't look like their owners.
This is what I
because
learned
Hugo
because-
Hofstetter is the nicest man ever.
This is because I was sitting in the coffee shop with Ian this morning, and the first thing Ian asked was not about the chicane or
No,
about Roubaix.
Because
But about
because that's
Hugo's dog.
Ian's only previous interaction with Hugo Hofstetter. Before you came in, when I was at the coffee shop, Sonny Colbrelli came in, and for some reason, I think I was overtired, and I was getting ready to an interview that I was way too tired and early for. Sonny Colbrelli comes in, makes eye contact with me. I nod at him like a long lost friend, and he sort of waits for a second, doesn't do anything, orders his coffee, and then spends his time staring at me because he thinks that he must know me because of how over familiar I've been with him. And I just had to get that off my chest, even though this is the preview podcast, because it was weird, and I apologize.
Before we get into the women's race
Yeah.
on Saturday, we should talk briefly about this crash in the Basque Country today. Not
Yeah.
because it has anything to
just
do
do
with
it
Roubaix
quick.
or
Let's
anything
just
to do with the
do it
preview,
quickly.
but because it happened today, and
big
we have an
news.
opportunity to talk about it in the podcast, in a podcast. So I guess, just real briefly, what happened? Who did it affect?
It was on a descent in the Tour of the Basque Country. I mean, I was catching up with this like in real time at the Quickstep press conference. Serial Quickstep rider was leading like a domestique. I don't know how to pronounce the name. The Eritrean guy for Little Trek, he seemed to fall, or was one of the first to fall. Remco Evenepoel sort of avoided and careered off, missing like the two big rocks right on the turning point, like where.
Yeah.
What do we call it? It wasn't the apex.
No,
but
it was
like the exit.
it became the exit of the corner. It
Yeah.
wasn't the intended exit.
avoided
yeah.
trees. He
Also,
eventually
bunny hopped
fell
over a huge ditch.
It was
Massive
crazy.
bunny hop.
Vingo went down hard. He was in like there's a storm drain sort of situation. that
Yeah,
he
like a
was in.
concrete storm drain.
Roglic, he got up
Yep.
to go in team car, but he looked pretty damaged. Vingo has, in his crash, he was carried off with an oxygen mask on like a hospital trolley. Looked pretty bad. He's broken ribs and
collarbone,
clavicle. Yeah.
So what are the long-term effects here? I mean,
well,
we just took out a huge number of GC contenders.
Tour de France is, who knows what's going to happen now. The weirdest thing was
like the race at all. They just cancel it.
Oh, I don't know. Well, the thing is,
I mean, hell, it's a much better shot for Tadej Pogacar to win the double.
Do you know the weirdest thing was? We were there at the Quickstep press conference. We are waiting for the Belgian media to finish their interviews with Patrick Lefevere, and the English lot are queuing up behind. That's what we do. And in between the changeover, someone brings a phone to Patrick Lefevere to show him the replay of the crash. And he watches it, and he's watching it almost like he doesn't have like millions of euros riding on the safety of his rider. Like, not to diminish probably how much he cares about this. Maybe it's because we're all there and he doesn't want to provide like a moment for everyone to write about. But it was very eerie to then watch everyone else in the room, because all the riders are still there, the staff are there. Wilfred Peters comes over to ask him in Flemish about, have you seen the crash? So it was weird to see in real time everyone sort of absorb this information, but there is almost a disconnect of
what was the general Belgian response? Like were the reporters?
Well, the reporters then queued up behind us to then ask about Remco after we'd finished with our questions. But yeah, this is huge ramifications for the rest of the season. I imagine if people at home watch on TV, this was probably a way bigger thing. But when you're like in the chaos of
another bike race, a different bike race.
And everyone here is focused on what's going to happen on Sunday, which is already going to be chaos. It's almost like they can't let it enter into their thought process, because then what do you do, right? You can't start getting existential about bike racing if you're a bike racer or a team. But it's terrible news. Vingegaard, there's been a huge debate about like the gratuitous replays on TV.
Yeah.
Which probably does need to be sorted, because as we were talking about before,
I think we saved that
every
for
other major
placeholders
sports,
next week.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week. But every major sports doesn't show this stuff. You shouldn't see a rider on a hospital trolley with an oxygen mask.
Yeah.
Or lying crumpled on a floor.
I don't want to see anybody who might be dead. It's a pretty easy rule.
Well, the thing is, it's horrible for anyone, but there are families, friends, teams out there. It's bullshit.
Well, let's leave that there.
Park it.
Yeah. Huge ramifications for I think the next couple months of racing
for the season
really.
Season
and yeah, we'll give it the time it sort of deserves, I think, next week in placeholders. But yeah, we just it happened today, so it's worth dropping into this little Roubaix episode. Ian has just showed up. Hello. What beer are you drinking?
Troubadour's Triple Belgian IPA, which sounds dangerous. And when I ordered it, the man said, "Oh, it's dangerous."
Have you?
I believe him.
And you brought a friend.
I did.
Can you introduce yourself?
Joe.
Hi, I'm Joey D'Antoni. I'm on the Escape Collective trip, and we're having a good time. And I ran into Ian at dinner, and he took me to this podcast.
And just how much fun are you having on this trip, to tell everyone at home?
My legs are pretty sore, but I'm having a good time. I did have to take a client call at like 8 p.m., and I don't want to discuss the client call because there was a lot of cursing during it that I had to mute myself for.
Okay.
But,
Sounds like I could maybe be of use to in a business sense.
Yeah. Send me your resume.
Johnny.
Sorry. Anyway, just quickly before we get
Thanks
back to the
us,
women's
Joey.
race. Yeah. I just want to... I mentioned to Ian his outfit this morning. I love it. I love his outfit. It's one of those Adidas 3-stripe zip-up fleeces. He looks like he's about to ask me for £1 outside a corner shop.
Can I give you some context behind the outfit? So we, as a team building activity, went on a beer bike. I don't know if we've discussed this in the podcast.
Not enough if we haven't.
We'll talk about it on another
also,
podcast.
we have an entire another race to preview, so
yeah,
you know.
sorry.
Okay, well, I'll be real quick. Anyway, I fell off the beer bike.
You did do that. You were the only one to do so.
It looked really bad.
Collapsed like one of those
sounded
crash dummies you
horrible.
see in the video reenactment.
I was trying to get content, and the ground was moving faster than my feet. And sometimes these things happen. Anyway, so I tore the knee in my jeans, and across the road from the medium shitty hotel that we were staying in was
That was
a
a good
vintage
hotel.
store. And I went in there.
It was the
and
Vintage Factory, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The vintage factory, and I
Is that
found...
where that came from?
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually,
much for?
2 out of 3 items
not
that
interesting.
I bought from the vintage
How
factory.
much was that? The fleet. The,
€15.
Okay, I should have gone there.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you're a thrifty man that has one item of
One
clothing
bag of clothes.
in each possible category.
You saw
So,
me. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say this on the podcast.
Johnny-
I found a limit. I found
Johnny
a
has
line.
been wearing my shoes for most of the last week.
Yeah, that's not
because
even the
he
worst
went
thing you've
in the
witnessed me
van.
do. We
Only
won't get
because
to that.
they were like a 5-minute walk away in a van.
I don't know where the van was. No one's known where the van is at any point during this trip. It just appears.
I think also if I did not know where my shoes were, then I would take some stronger measures to find my shoes.
I've told you about how. We'll get to the women's race very, very soon. I told you earlier in the week amongst the shoe escapade about how a time when I was 23 at my first job, I had 2 pairs of black trainers, and somehow I ended up in a situation where one pair, the left shoe was broken, and the other pair, the right shoe was broken. So I wore 2 mismatched black trainers for 3 days until I got caught by a colleague and had to change it. But that's just an insight into how you can live your life, gentlemen.
It's just started raining on
That's
us.
very
So
resourceful.
let's the women's Roubaix. I'm
Shoot.
looking forward to the women's Roubaix. Is it raining?
It is a little
It
bit.
is raining.
It's spitting.
It'll be fine.
What's a bit
Okay,
of drizzle
it's
between
happens.
friends?
So on Saturday, we have, is it the 4th?
Fourth edition. Yep.
4th edition. Woo! Time flies. The 4th edition of the women's Paris-Roubaix, and it will be, Matt, give me the basics. Give me the rundown of the women's Paris-Roubaix.
Sure. We've just had a whole bunch of members arrive. This is exciting.
Members are. You have to project.
Now
that.
there's pressure.
There's pressure. There's real pressure.
148.5 kilometers, 17 cobbled sectors. For those familiar with the men's Paris-Roubaix route, it's basically what is the last 17 sectors of the men's race. It's just that whole route after a short introductory section around Dinan at the start. There's 2 5-star sectors, so Mont-Saint-Pavel and Carrefour de l'Arbre, which means that the Arenberg is not part of the women's race. So all that discussion earlier about the chicane is only relevant to the men's race, not
Thank
relevant
God
for
for
the
doing
women's.
that again.
We talked about this earlier, Kelly. Maybe there is a discussion about whether the Arenberg should be in the women's race, but that's maybe a discussion for another time.
Yeah, well, not another time, but maybe 15 minutes from now.
Okay.
Let's get through the preview, and then we can talk about that.
Last year's edition of Paris-Roubaix, the women's race, was incredible. I think we all remember Alison Jackson's amazing win on the velodrome there. Watching back the highlights last night, I was just reminded of how good a race that was. Not only that the break survived, but they got within 15 seconds of
was
being
crazy,
caught,
yeah.
and so many attacks at the end there with Jackson and Marta Lack and a whole bunch of others attacking. The favourites closing in.
Side note, Abby wrote, I think, one of the best pieces we've had on the site in a very long time with Alison Jackson. It was sort of an as told to kind of thing.
Okay.
So if you want sort of the full, like, from Alison's eyes perspective on last year's Roubaix, go check out that story. It's still
Such a
up on the
good
site.
perspective on
Really
the
cool.
thought and preparation and
And a
dedication that
podcast,
goes
actually.
into it.
that reminds me. It was up like 2
Podcast
days
as well.
ago.
Yeah, just the effort that went into it from Jackson and the work with her team and all of that was quite remarkable. So yeah, definitely check that one out. Last year's race was amazing. The first 2 editions were won by solo riders. Last year, within that group of 6, we really don't have a blueprint for how the men's race is won, and that's 112 years old or whatever. We certainly don't have one for the women's race. It could be absolutely
true.
anything on
Yeah.
Saturday. So we've had solo winners, we've had a small group. It could be a bigger group. Who knows, really? But that's one of the things that makes Roubaix so exciting.
Who
How-
are the? Oh, go on. Oh, sorry. Why am I trying to jump in with questions? I'm not the host. Go ahead. Sorry. I just want to know.
Johnny wants to host. No, you ask your question because I have
for
my
it. I'm
questions. But
excited.
if you have
Okay.
a natural question, you should ask the question.
Okay, we've kind of been rushed off our feet this week with just doing everything. I want to know who are the riders to look out for before we go into anything else. I want to know sort of how they're coming to this. Do we have sort of these? We talk in the men's race about the riders who are sort of predisposed to maybe being really good at Roubaix. Like, do we have similar riders there, or is it, is that not the case?
Yeah, I think riders to watch, anybody in an SD Works Pro Time kit, anybody in a
Okay,
little
great.
Trek kit. No, I think it is obviously SD Works Pro Time will be one of the teams to watch. Kopecky will be one of the riders to watch, as she's just about all the classics. Kaylee, you have your hand up.
I have a question, Matt. How pissed off are SD Works right now?
They would
Out
be
of
pretty
10.
pissed off.
out of 10.
I'd probably say a 7.8 out of 10.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
off. Maybe trending towards 8. I think it's relevant that they haven't won this race in the 3 editions we've had previously. That would not sit well for them. Kopeck's been 2nd and 7th in the past. They will be extra pissed off after Flanders last week, where things really didn't go their way, partially due to their own fault, partially due to the Koppenberg. So they will really, really want to win this on Saturday. They'll be pissed off after last year, where the break stayed away, when Kopecky probably would have won had they come back together. They'll be on a mission Saturday for sure.
Love it. We always run out of time to talk about like the sort of the placeholdery things that happen in the women's peloton. The Kopecky going back to the car for food and then Danny Stam like digging her out in the press was wild. And if that won't drive you on to win a race you've never won before, then I don't know what else could possibly
Give the
happen.
context here. What's the story? That was the entirety of the story, basically.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. Kopecky went back to the car to get her own like food
At Flanders.
And then at the end of the race, obviously Kopecky didn't win. So
And this
that
wasn't
sort of
long
mistake.
before the Koppenberg, right?
Yeah.
Where she was then out of position and Vollering was out of position, and then they got caught behind the stuff up ahead and
Yep.
then ended up having to walk. And, you know, you listened to Demi Vollering afterwards and it was kind of like, it's the climb's fault that we didn't get a chance to win and it could have gone a different way, but they should have been in a better position. They know how decisive that climb is. So
Yeah.
How much do you
Overconfidence?
Well, I was going to say, how much do you think, maybe overconfidence, but how much do you think the fact that Vollering's probably on her way out is even more disrupting a team that already struggles to internally balance so many star riders?
Yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be there in the background. I would like to think that they're all professional enough and able to get on with the job enough that they're still able to, perform at their best.
Johnny
but
and I prefer to believe that everybody hates each other all the time.
They
Yeah, that's
sometimes
more
do, when
interesting.
they actually tell you after a couple of beers.
Yeah, usually we believe that because we often find out that is the case.
So I would offer
Later.
a counterpoint to that,
Okay,
and that
nice.
is I think if Vollering was going to be disruptive to the team, then she wouldn't have done what she did last week, which was stop and wait for Kopecky a bunch of times.
That's true.
There we go.
She played a really good supporting role for Kopecky last week. It ended up not working out for them, but she did everything that she could and should have done as a support rider in that case.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so SD works, S-Day works,
S-Day
as
works.
our good friend Cosmo would say, and also the actual team would say, so maybe that's the way we should say it.
Little Trek
They
as
are
well.
7.8 pists out of 10.
Yeah,
Little
look-
Trek, though,
Show me
not
Little
in
Trek.
the slightest. Not pissed in the slightest. They are, I should say, it's pissed off in the sort of American version of that word, not
What's the American version?
like angry.
That's the English version.
No, you guys are pissed is like drunk.
No, if
They're
we're
not
pissed off,
drunk.
we're pissed off. We're angry.
Well,
If
we
we're
use-
pissed, we're drunk. Oh, you're pissed.
We can say pissed for both.
Ah.
I'm glad we solved that.
Yeah, I mean, Little Trek has been the team of the classics on the women's side for sure. Interestingly, though, the two riders that finished on the podium from Little Trek last week at Flanders aren't going to be racing. So Lisa Longo-Borghini, even though she's a former winner of the race, isn't racing on Saturday. She's got her eyes on the Ardennes Classics. And Shirin Van Anrooy, who was so instrumental in setting up that win and putting that remarkable move at the end, is also not racing. But even with those two out, they've still got such a strong team. Ellen Van Dyke, Lucinda Brand, Elisa Balsamo, who's already got a couple of World Tour wins this year, Loretta Hansen, Eleanor Backstead. It's a very strong lineup, and I would be very surprised if they're not right up there in the mix again on Saturday.
There or thereabouts.
There or thereabouts, we might say.
Any riders sort of not from the major teams that we should be keeping an eye on?
Just the GOAT.
Oh.
That's a major team.
Well,
Come
which
on.
goat? Because
Well, this is the thing. So, yes, Visma Lisa Bike is a
Yeah.
major team.
We're talking about Mariana Voss, obviously.
We are talking about Mariana Voss. Does she have the team to support her in the way that SD Works Pro Time and Little Trek have? No, she does not have the team, not nearly the same strength of team. Will that matter to her? Probably not. She's good enough to...
Does it matter at Roubaix? Not
Yeah,
so much?
Not so much.
Yeah.
So the Paris-Roubaix is one of the very, very few races that Mariana Voss has not won. And she's already ticked off two of the races that were on that list this season in Dwaalsdorf-Vlaanderen and Omloop het Nieuwsblad. She's been second year before. I think there's a lot of people that would love to see her win. And as Abby mentioned on We'll Talk this week, there'd be something just right about Voss winning Paris-Roubaix in the same way that her taking the yellow jersey at the women's tour a couple of years ago just felt right, Voss in the yellow jersey. So I would very much look out for her. She got close last year, and I'd be very surprised if she's not in amongst it again on Saturday.
It's like, I don't know if you have this in your respective countries, but a big thing of British sporting culture is the Panini sticker books, where you collect all of the people. You have like baseball trading cards or something? Maybe?
We don't really get it, but I know.
You understand what it is. So basically,
we do like baseball cards and stuff like that. So slightly different.
So you have a sticker book full of like all of the Premier League footballers and the stadiums and all that stuff. If Marianne Vos doesn't before the end of her career win Paris-Roubaix, if you have one sticker not in your sticker book, it just feels wrong. Even if you go through all the other 20 pages and everyone's there.
Cringe every time you get to that page.
You're gonna not even cringe, just like nails down a chalkboard of like this just feels wrong to my bones.
How does Voss win?
Small group sprint.
Yeah,
she's probably
velodrome sprint.
We should let her know.
Velodrome sprint.
Yeah,
and she is a former trackie. She's a Olympic champion on the track. Small group sprint. She'll be very hard to beat in that situation, I think.
What I'm looking forward to about the women's race, not only that it's on a separate day, so you actually have the chance to not get distracted by the men's race, which obviously, speaking personally, is what you have to focus on. Like,
that's your job, actually.
Yeah,
it's literally my job. Yeah. That you get to spend a whole day watching a women's race. Previously, what I've done, which I imagine we'll do on Saturday, is the feature on the last rider into the velodrome.
Yeah, I love that.
Which for the women's race was even more special, just because there's only been
a couple of them,
a few.
Yeah, actually, returning to Voss, I feel like it feels particularly, I don't know, correct, right? That like sort of near the end of her career, we're getting some of these races that didn't exist for the majority of her career, so that she can tick them off. A yellow jersey at the Tour de France, Roubaix, like it feels a bit faded, does it not? Like she can't exit the sport without ticking these things off that didn't exist for 90% of the time that she was racing.
Now?
36, I think.
So not that.
That
is.
I mean, she could go another 10 years in women's racing. Like, yeah.
Another two on the list are Strade Bianchi and Liège. She hasn't won those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, nobody cares about Liège, but Strade would be great.
You don't care
about
about
Liège.
Liège.
You're not allowed to say that. Some of us might think it, but you're not allowed to say it out loud.
Other riders to keep an eye on, Grace Brown from Australia. She's had two very good races here. I know she really wants to have a good result. Pfeiffer Georgie was really good last year as well. I'd be keeping an eye on Canyon SRAM. Interestingly, Tiff Cromwell, who rides most of the season in a support role for a team, has been given leadership role on Saturday.
Good at gravel.
Good at gravel. As she said in an interview with SBS this week, she just knows how to box on really well. She's just an absolute fighter. So, I don't know. Alice Towers was in the break last year. They've got a very strong squad, Canyon SRAM. And Emma Norsgaard, who you mentioned before and who we'll hear from later on. Even though she has a cold this week, she'll definitely be one to watch. And for the superstitious among us, last year,
here we go. This is more.
Abby did a really big feature on Alison Jackson before the race as well, interviewing her about how she would win the race. She's done one this week with Emma Norsgaard about how she would win the race.
Abby
the queen maker.
Yeah,
this is like how they'd Paul the Octopus choose all the winners of the
World Cup. Yeah.
Abby is our
they were
octopus.
correct like 8 times in a row. Abby now I've got to choose.
Oh,
an
they
animal
put the
that's
roof
not
out. That's nice. It's been raining on us for about 15 minutes.
Why would they not do that?
good. Sorry,
Sorry.
All right. So last thing before we get to Emma Norsgaard, and we're gonna throw to an interview that Abby conducted with
did I
Emma
ruin
at
a
the end.
perfect segue there?
No. At the end of the race, I want to talk about the Arenberg thing first. This is. I don't know. It was more of a talking point in the really early editions, like the first and second editions of Paris-Roubaix, and then the women's race kind of settled into its own course, and I think people kind of came to understand that. I think that has a certain value, but at the same time, the Arenberg is the Arenberg, right? And it's a great part of the men's race that I think a lot of people would like to see as part of the women's race. And weirdly enough, one of the reasons that was always sort of put forth as why they couldn't run the Arenberg in the women's race is it would be too early in the cobble sector. So the men actually do, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, the men do a whole bunch of sectors before they get to the Arenberg. Like, it may not seem like it, but they've already lopped off like a third of the field are gone, right? The women's race would literally go pavement into the Arenberg, right? And that would be rough. if you're hitting it at 60K an hour. Does the chicane kind of negate that argument a little bit and make it maybe more likely that we see an Arenberg in the women's race in the future? Or are they going to run into the same problem, which is basically like, we don't want a sector that difficult to be first because it would just explode the peloton and then it would never come back and then it would be a bad bike race.
And that's part of the problem. Like the first sector in the women's race comes after 66 kilometers. And with the layout of the race that they have at the moment with the start in Da Nang, if you had the Arenberg, it would be the first climb of the day and it would be after basically no tarmac at all.
Yeah.
So there's no lead in, there's no warm up. It's straight into the Arenberg. And that would be an interesting spectacle, but I'm not sure the organisers will want to do that.
Well, also, you can't chicane into the first cobbled sector. Like, that is against everything.
Yeah.
Right?
To be clear, I'm not really advocating for this. I think there was some advocacy for inclusion of the Arenberg, again, early on, but I think the race has kind of grown into its own without it and has proven to be plenty difficult without it. And the fact that they start with, is it Troisville is the first one or Queevy? It's one of those sort of like
Ornang.
quite easy early ones.
Ornang?
And
4-star.
which one?
Hornang?
Oh, Hornang, Warlang. That's right. Okay, so it's the ones near those big water towers. So they turn onto that, and it's actually like the couples are quite nice across most of the. And I think it's a good way to enter the race. Breaks it up just enough. Like it works. It's proven to work. So I don't think there's any real value in adding the Arenberg, but I do think
It's just a
the
spectacle,
conversation will reopen when we see how the men's race goes tomorrow. Or Sunday. What day is it? I don't know.
Friday. One last question before we go to the interview.
Yeah.
Matt, I saw the last bullet point on your prep was about the weather.
Yeah.
Are we going to be...
What's the weather for the whole weekend? Let's look.
Yeah, so we've had pretty miserable weather in general the last little while. It's been raining in the Roubaix region all of this week.
Yeah, on and off, downpours.
Yeah.
1 minute it's sunny, the next it's like pissing it down.
If you go look at the recon photos that riders have been putting on Instagram, it's been pretty filthy out there. But it's going to clear up for the weekend. So the women's race is actually going to be completely dry by the sounds of it, as in no rain, and 23, 24 degrees Celsius, which
T-shirt
is
weather, fellas.
77.
Here we
Guns
I'm
out.
seeing 25 degrees on Saturday.
Amazing.
Which is 75, 76 Fahrenheit. Like, it's a warm day, particularly when you've been coming out of
There we go.
much colder.
Yeah.
45 and raining is basically what it's been here for 10 days.
I think the men's race will be a little bit cooler the following day and a slight chance of rain, but still not likely to be like it has been this week.
Yeah.
Casper Asgreen said today that the cobbles actually dry remarkably quickly.
They do.
So
Except
Ooh.
if the puddles on the side don't dry.
Yes, I remember
They
that.
drive over and the puddles splash, the cars splash the water onto the cobbles and make them wet right
It's
before
such
the
a
riders.
specific like road condition and weather sort of system.
It could be like totally dry, but if there's puddles inside the road, the cobbles are going to end up wet.
Is the Arenberg slower to dry, given it's in the trees and kind
It
of
is
undercover?
slower to dry. Yeah, it's definitely slower to dry. And actually, that's one of the
That's
things
true.
that the Israel Premier Tech fellows were saying in the coffee shop this morning was that right hand turn onto the cobbles at full gas, specifically because they're trying to lay down, like 700 watts to get onto that thing, could actually be like you're going to see guys like spin out basically, like
Do you
F1
really
style.
think it's
just,
going
like,
to
do a
be this
360.
crazy?
Only if it's really greasy. I think the only reason that would be an issue is if it's really wet and
I think
slippery.
they're going over. They've had the goats on the Arenberg. Do you think they're going to be going with like hair dryers or something? Just
Well,
to...
they go with street sweepers. They
We
bring the
saw
street-
one of them.
Yeah, they go the
We
street
saw
sweepers.
children operating heavy machinery.
You need like the like in the cricket, Johnny, like the super soppers on the outfield when it's been a wet day of cricket,
Yes,
and
yes,
they kind
yes,
of
yes.
soak up all the water on the Arenberg.
Ian, you've really added a lot to this podcast. What do you have to say for yourself?
I just heard Johnny saying children operating heavy machinery, and I knew that was.
You knew that was
somewhere
like
I
that
could
was the bat
contribute.
signal for Ian to join in the conversation.
All right, let's get out of here. We are going to throw to an interview that Abby Mickey did with Emma Norsgaard about Roubaix. So it's sort of like, I guess, more broadly about Roubaix, like the motivations behind it, how you ride it, things like that, why it's so special. And we just thought it was a great chat, and so we thought we'd throw it into this episode. So we're going to leave you with this. It will just sort of fade to black at the end,
Oh.
and we'll be back with a on the ground episode on Saturday.
Sweet.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, I wanted to chat with you about Paris-Roubaix because it's such a hard race to predict. And the reason that I wanted to talk to you is because you said last year at the tour about after the stage that you won about how you were changing your tactical approach, but also your like fitness approach to how you wanted to be as a rider. I guess specialization is a weird term in women's cycling, but kind of. Yeah. And so I thought that Paris-Roubaix is just like a fantastic race for you in this new version of your career. And so I wanted to, I don't know, see if you'd put any thought into how you would win, the tactical approach you would take if it was like the perfect day, and the kind of small details that Paris-Roubaix has that other races don't have when it comes to how to win the race and how to view the race from a rider's perspective.
Yes, I think the key for Paris-Roubaix is always, this mentality of never giving up. And yeah, also, I think Alison had the correct entry last year, right? In an early break, it seemed like this is the way to win the race. But I think also if you are not in this break, you should never, never, never give up in this race. I think everything can happen. And yeah, also this morning I called my husband and I say, there's no chance I'm going to race on Saturday if I feel like this. And he say, yeah, but don't give up. It's Paris-Roubaix. Something magical can happen in the day. So, it's always, for sure, I will, if I start on Saturday, this is the mentality I will go in with, that, if I am not feeling 100%, it doesn't have to be super bad. I mean, the first year I did Paris-Roubaix, I was mentally so fucked, to say it in a nice way. And I was there just to help. But in the end, because I never gave up, it was still a top 10. So I think this is for sure what I will remember is the first edition of Paris-Roubaix. And for me, winning it would be, of course, in a group that can go away. And I would say exactly the same as Alison. I would really prefer to go in an early break because, yeah, I'm also maybe a little bit scared of these pavés, to be honest, and maybe scared to crash and something will happen and I would go away. And I think for me, the most iconic way to win is coming alone into the velodrome.
There's no more luck involved. You made it yourself.
Exactly. Like, after the pavés, for me, for sure, I would try and go alone. I wouldn't wait for a sprint. I wouldn't risk it for something happen like, was it Femke from SD last year that crashed on the velodrome? This would be so heartbreaking for me. So I would for sure try and attack from after the last pavé. This is for sure. I would be alone in the velodrome.
If you kind of picture the race in your head and like say every pavé sector you go over, there's just more riders kind of falling out the back and you've managed to make it. Who are the riders, if you're looking around, who are the riders that you would see around you? And how would you then approach the rest of the race with them in the same group as you?
Which rider I would prefer or which rider I think?
Let's do both.
Oh, well, I think, of course, that SD Works will have some riders in the break and, of course, also Trek. And I think maybe that could be a good thing for me if they are sitting there and looking at each other, then they might think, oh, Emma, we can let her go. It doesn't matter. So in this way, I don't see it in a negative way, and I cannot really expect a Paris-Roubaix without any strong riders in front. So of course, for me, I think also it would be even more crazy to take a nice result if every one of the best ones were in front with me. So yeah, for sure, Kopecky, Vibes, Longo Borghini, maybe the whole Trek actually. Yeah,
I'll say so.
yeah.
Basque has to be up there. I mean, if it's not you for the win on Saturday, I just want to be Basque.
He's cool, but it's something with Voss. It's like everyone is happy when she wins somehow. I don't know.
And she's just so nice and like respectful, I guess.
but she really is on the bike. She's also just classy and super respectful. So yeah, her and Lizzie Dijkman, actually, these two are really iconics. I have to say,
like, it's a perfect scenario, and you're looking around, and there are riders from other teams. Who would you want to be up the road with you? Like, who could you count on to work with you and then beat on the line?
Oh, first of all, I would want one of my teammates to be there with me, just to feel better, feel safe, have one to count with. And then second of all, one that would work with me would probably Voss. I think she feels super confident in her sprint, and she could beat me in a sprint, and I think that's why she would probably work with me. Reeves would work with me. Kopecky would work with me. And I think, from Trek, that's difficult because then it should be Balsamo, I think.
Yeah.
And actually, it would be nice to have Longo Bugini because she's scoring so strong right now, so she can make the gap bigger. So I think that would also be nice to have her.
So in reality, you want the best riders up the road with you.
Yes, actually, yes, because I think, I don't know, that would just be so cool, wouldn't it? Like, if I had to win in the best way possible, it would be from a group with the best riders.
That would be the most iconic way to do it. Solo or out sprinting Voss and Weavis and Balsamo.
Solo, because the other thing is never gonna happen.
How are you feeling about your new approach to bike racing, both last year and this year now, with a Tour de France Femme stage under your belt, and in this kind of new age of women's cycling? Because I think this spring in particular has just been so different than any other that I can remember.
Yeah, this is for sure. No, I feel good. I, of course, still need a nice result, but actually I've never felt so good on the bike. I feel like I'm in shape. I'm better than ever. Like, not sprinting, but just my general shape is really good. I felt so good in Flanders, but I was just sometimes you're also unlucky in races like this and crashed on this stupid Koppenberg. Yeah, this is also Flanders, staying on the bike. But yeah, no, I feel super good. I'm happy with where I am. I'm sad it isn't with more results, but I think I can say I did everything I could in all races, and I gave everything. And for me, this is almost just as important as a top 10, So yeah, this is what I will take out of this classic campaign, is that I gave everything I had.
The Arenberg was a huge bummer because I know you were up there, like, in the right position, but it was just you had to be like the top 3, top 4 to make it over that climb, which just sucked.
It sucks because it would probably have been the same winner of the race, but maybe the race would have looked different. I'm really sad about that it had to be in the race, but this is the same problem every year, right? That no one can climb this stupid climb if it's wet. So yeah, I'm a bit sad. I hope they take it out for next year. It's just sad if it comes down to this, that it's just who can stay on the bike that wins, Like, okay, Longo Bugini would have won anyway, but maybe top 10 would have looked different.
Talking about how like more than half the peloton had to dismount. Even if the result was the same, it would be, I don't know, in a way, I think it would be a little bit more of a valid victory, even if it had been the same.
Yeah, no, 100%. I 100% agree. And I just see on my Instagram all these heartbroken Instagram posts like, oh, if I was not crashing on Koppenberg, maybe. And yeah, it's not nice to see that it has to be in this way that it's won,
Hopefully, the cobbles will be wet for Paris-Roubaix, so you did get a primer.
Yeah.
For that. The sun might be shining, but the cobbles will probably be wet with the rain this week, so hopefully that makes it even more exciting.
Exactly. Not dangerous. That I don't want this. Then I think even if I feel better, I think, no. Ooh, I still feel bad if it's really wet, like the first edition. If it's a little bit wet, it's also okay. I mean, then also I don't like when riders go on the side of the cobbles. If it's completely dry, they can like ride in the mud almost. And for me, this is it's so dangerous. And it's not. Then you don't stay on the pavés, and it's I don't know. I prefer when we all are on the pavés and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, well, it makes it more selective, but it also just adds like an element of like it's like a movie making element that's added to the race that just makes it bigger, grander.
Yes, exactly. No, fuck, when you say it like this, I really hope I'm going to be ready for Saturday.